does one give themselves permission to take care of themselves?
I'm giving everybody 1,000% permission. If you're a caregiver, you must take care of yourself. It is not selfish. Don't have any guilt in it, because my guess is you weren't taking that good care of yourself before you got to this point.
One of the things that I know is important to you, and I've certainly gone through it, and it's a theme in many people's lives right now, is being a caregiver
Yes.
to either our parents or a loved one. You know, we're at that age where stuff starts to happen, and certainly most of our parents are in their 70s, 80s, or 90s, and it's unavoidable. How do we, what kind of words of wisdom can you offer and explain this dynamic?
Because I've gone through this personally myself as well, and helped so many people through this as well. There's two sides of it, of course. There's the caregiver, and then there's whoever the patient is. And what a lot of people don't understand, that when the illness hits or the medical condition, whatever it is, that's enough for two people to have to go through. But what happens is there's been a relationship long before the illness hits, the medical condition hits. So here's two people. One's a caregiver, one's a patient. And there's baggage that comes long before the illness hits. There's long before the caregiver becomes a caregiver, long before the patient becomes a patient. So there's emotions that have been in each person's body that maybe haven't been addressed. Most of the time, it hasn't been addressed. Or maybe it was just addressed and they're just getting ready to start a new phase, and then a condition hits. So many people don't realize that it's not just about the illness that hits, it's about what came long before that illness.
Well, and I think what we're, maybe we should clarify too, when we talk about caregivers, we talk about us being the caregiver, not necessarily the profession of caregiving.
Yes.
Yeah, although that's difficult in and of itself. But when you're taking care, like you said, of somebody that you have relationships with, and you may be very resentful of being in that.
Absolutely. And what I teach caregivers all the time is, first of all, caregivers are not good at taking care of themselves, because they're taking care of the finances, maybe they're working, maybe they have kids to take care of, they're running the house, they're taking their patient, their loved one, to medical appointments, they're doing medical research, whatever it might be. So they have so much on their plate. But what I always tell them is this: but you don't hesitate to make a medical appointment for the loved one you're taking care of. You make sure that that loved one gets what they need, whether it's they have to eat a different way, go to multiple doctor's appointments, you make sure they're okay. It is the same thing that has to happen for yourself. So when you have your iPhone and you're putting appointments in for the person you're taking care of, you must put a time down of what you're going to do. Create what I call a healing team. Whether you need a therapist, a chiropractor, yoga, taking a bath, whatever it is, because if you don't put it down when you're a caregiver, you're not going to do it. And then resentment builds from that. Another thing that always happens when someone's a caregiver, depending on how long they're taking care of someone, their body is taking in, once again, everything that's going on. And the body will take in the stress. And what I see over and over again is that if you take really good care of yourself as a caregiver, your body's still going to be hit with something that happens after the caregiving situation is done. And so for those of you who are not taking care of yourself while you're a caregiver, it's going to be 1,000 times worse for you after the situation's done.
That happened in my family. Now that you say that, it became crystal clear. My grandmother had Alzheimer's, and my aunt was the caregiver. And she died of breast cancer shortly after my grandmother passed. So when she was finally free of and it was a burden. It's a burden.
And she carried the burden in her heart.
Yeah.
Which your heart center, that's where your breasts are. So it's very,
That makes
very,
so much sense.
yes, it's very, very important. You have to take care of yourself physically, mentally, emotionally, nutritionally, and spiritually. Whatever spiritually or religiously, whatever that means to you, you have to do that. Another thing that I want to point out is, again, the caregiving situation is bigger than this lifetime. Let's just say, again, that we're in the caregiving situation, and you're the patient and I'm your caregiver. So you're my loved one and I'm your loved one. So what am I supposed to be learning in this situation? And when I speak to caregivers about that, they're like, what do you mean, what am I supposed to be learning? I'm taking care of this person. I'm like, oh, it runs so much deeper, runs so much deeper. So what you as the patient are going through, look underneath the medical stuff. Look underneath it all and figure out what are the lessons that maybe you didn't pay attention to earlier on in your life. What are you actually learning through this? And maybe you're not supposed to get better. Maybe your lesson is, how do I transition to death, and how do I teach the people around me about death?
Interesting.
And for me as the caregiver, what am I supposed to be learning individually that maybe my theme still follows me that I didn't get? Okay? And
Such as?
Well, that's different for everybody.
Yeah, that's true.
That can be whatever it might be. Maybe it could be somebody learning to take care of themselves, set boundaries. Because a lot of time caregivers don't set boundaries. So you're forced.
You feel guilty.
Yes, you're forced to learn how to set a boundary. And so you're learning something individually as a patient. I'm learning something individually as a caregiver. And then what are we learning together in this relationship as a couple, or if you're my child, or if you're my parent, or if you're my significant other, we're learning something together as well too. It's a bigger picture. When we get stuck in the minutia of just what this is, we lose the gifts in it, we lose the messages in it, and it can bring us down a lot more. When you look at it from the spiritual, bigger perspective, it's so much more, and it helps to get through it more.
One of the issues also as you're giving care is the person feels smothered or that loss of independence.
Absolutely.
Do you have some advice on what a caregiver can do to lessen that feeling?
Yeah. First of all, as a caregiver, you have to remember, don't do everything for them. You know, there's a fine line of wanting to do everything and enabling. And again, you go back to the person. Okay, here's a new day. What things would you like to do today that you know you can do today? And you have to have some real, authentic talks about it. And they may or may not know. So as a caregiver, you have to pay attention to what you can see that they can do. If they can pick out certain food, okay, it's kind of like working with a child sometimes, where you have to say, okay, here's a selection of food. What works for you today? What do you want to wear today? Would you like to go on a walk? Where do you want to go on a walk? You tell me how far you can go today. What do you need? It's asking questions, so they still feel like they are volatile, and they still have something, with their brain that they can bring to the table. And even if, like I said, they can tell you in this moment, but 2 moments later, that's different. You have to learn patience. And maybe, just maybe, that's part of your theme in this lifetime, is learning patience. And this patient is teaching you what patience is all about.
Well, thanks for making sense of that for us as well.
Sure. I hope it helps.
It does. We've really focused on being in the moment of that caregiving situation. One of the hard things is actually, and I know I went through this with my father and my mother, is getting them to the point where they admit that they need care, or that they can't live by themselves anymore. And that becomes obviously a big burden on family and loved ones.
Yes.
What kind of advice do you have to offer in that respect?
Sometimes you have to spend a lot of time having conversations over and over and over again about what's going on, and they might get really angry. So there's pointed questions that you can ask is, what's the scariest part of this for you as I talk to you about the possibility that you need some care? And that's a very loving way of, saying it. And that opens the door. And if they don't want to talk about it right then, you can say, I just need you to think about this, because here are some of the behaviors that I'm seeing and the symptoms that I'm seeing. And maybe there's others around that you bring into the room to help have
like
that type of an intervention. But
Yeah.
Start with one, because you don't want to overpower them.
Right.
There also is another situation that occurs, that actually occurred with me as well, which can occur with someone who's a lot older. With my husband, because there was brain issues going on, and he couldn't remember things. So I would say things 20 times over and over and over again. And he would be upset with me because I was caregiving for him, and he'd be like, I can do this. And I'd have to be really honest.
Lots of anger.
And you can do this with older parents too. So whether it was my husband or older parents, to say, this situation is not just about you. You have to realize that the way you respond and what you're doing is affecting me as well. So it's not just about you being sick, being angry, but when you do X, Y, and Z or don't do X, Y, and Z, this is how it's affecting me. And I know that you love me and I love you. So how do we resolve, how do we figure this out together?
That's a really good point. Positioning it in a way where you're asking them for help by allowing you to help them.
Yes.
You put them into an active role versus a passive role.
And they might have a conversation with you in this minute, and 2 hours later, it's the same thing again, and you get really good at saying the same thing all over again. Because there might be a time that it clicks, and then you can make changes in movement with that.
Okay.
And you know, I thought of something that I just wanted to say, and it might be very silly, but it helped me. When things got so difficult for me, I used to get in my car, and it didn't matter if it was in the dead cold of winter, because at that time we were living in Washington, D.C., and I would get in my car, I would put my top down, and if it was freezing out, I'd put my hat on, my gloves, my seat warmers, and I would drive out to the water, and I would put on certain music, and I would scream out loud, and then I would talk to nature, and then I would talk to my helpers, my guides and angels, listen to the music, and then when I was ready, I'd get back in my car, and I'd drive back home, and I'd say, okay, I can do this again for another day. So you find different, unique ways. The bathtub was also a big place for me. I put myself in a bathtub. That was a healing place. So find and do healing things for yourself, no matter how ridiculous that it is. That's really important.
Just one big scream.
I had multiples, but it was good because I didn't want to bring that energy to my husband. But I was also very honest with my husband. So, and that helped him too. So we were honest with each other, no matter how uncomfortable that it was.
Yeah. How does one give themselves permission to take care of themselves?
I'm giving everybody 1,000% permission. If you're a caregiver, you must take care of yourself. It is not selfish. Don't have any guilt in it, because my guess is you weren't taking that good care of yourself before you got to this point. So maybe now you have to learn how to take care of yourself. But it's 1,000% you have to take care of yourself. And I know that this is a silly adage, but most of us fly in planes. What did they say? Before you put your mask on somebody else, you got to put it on yourself. It's the same thing.
It's a great example.
Yeah, it's the same thing.
And you have a life still. And that's the other thing. You kind of step out of life while you're caregiving.
Well,
how do you handle that?
This is what I've seen. Your life is shortened a little bit more now. Your life is going to look a little different now because you're not going to be able to go out and do all the things that you did before. So you have to find a way to kind of embrace, okay, what am I going to do with this life right now? How am I going to do this? How is my life going to look? And this causes a lot of grief. It causes a lot of pain, because if it goes on for years, there's resentment, there's anger. Feel it. It's okay to feel the resentment. It's okay to feel the anger. And another thing that I tell caregivers to do, caregivers are always afraid to have the real conversations with their patient, with their loved one. You have to have the real conversations. It's okay to be able to say, I just have so much anger about this right now. And it's not you, but I need to tell you this because I don't want it to get in the way of us. And the patient might say, I've got a shitload of anger too because of what I'm going through. This is an opportunity to be real about what's going on, because it makes the intimacy between the two of you more authentic, and it helps you to get through it better.
Well, and that in and of itself is a healing process.
Always. Always.
Is there anything else that you want to leave our viewers with?
Just remember that this is a bigger picture than just the minutia of the medical appointments and the fear of, oh my God, are they going to die? Are they going to transition right now? If you step back and look at, what am I supposed to learn through this? What is my loved one, is the patient supposed to learn through this? And what are we supposed to learn together? This is an opportunity for growth, and you can be as pissed off as you want, you can be as resentful as you want, but you have to find outlets and how to talk about it with others, and then have that conversation with your loved one as well. Because once you work on it over here, when you bring that to the loved one who's your patient, you know, how do I say this? The bitterness, the cutting edge of it is out of it, and now you can just talk about, you know, what goes on with that.
Great. Thank you, Paige.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Thanks so much for watching. Right here's another video I think you might enjoy. And while you're at it, please subscribe to our channel. Buttons right here. Thanks. See you next time.